This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English.
So, hello and welcome to Rock and Roll English. Today on the show we have Daniel Gandolfi. You want to say hello, Dan?
Hello.
Very, very exciting. So, Dan, are you ready to rock and roll?
I am ready to rock and roll, Martin. Thank you for having me.
Okay, no problem. I can assure you there are at least 3 people listening to this show. So, in some ways, you are famous.
Who's listening?
Well, not right now, but...
No, not right now, but who will be listening? Anyone important?
Three of my students.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
when you come, you can sign autographs for them. So,
Will there be groupies?
of course.
Good.
So, tell us something about you, Dan.
I live in Chelmsford, in England.
Where is Chelmsford?
It's in Essex, which is just outside London.
Mm-hmm. Sounds interesting.
Well, it's not interesting. It's just a fact. That's where I live. Yeah, and I play football occasionally, and I read a lot. I'm boring.
Dan is rock and roll to the bone.
Mm-hmm. To the core.
To the core. To the bone, to the core, which means a lot, just for the listeners there. So Dan and I have been friends for about 27 years, haven't we, Dan?
Too long.
So when I said that we've been friends for 27 years, it's a nice little use of the present perfect there, because it's an action still in progress. We have been friends. So Dan, you know anything about the present perfect?
I know absolutely nothing about it. So this is a lesson for me as well.
Exactly. Every day is a school day, Dan.
Correct.
Okay, so Dan, we're going to speak about Palermo today in Italy. You okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, so how did you find Palermo?
Cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Hot, and I was going to say bohemian, but that's quite a
I
intense
promise
word.
you, I don't know what bohemian means. So would you like to explain that for us?
It's a kind of sort of like off the wall, sort of like hippie-ish. Not hippie-ish, but sort of there's a sort of clash of cultures, isn't there? So it's
yeah, but
it's
just to say there, when Dan said hippie-ish, that's adding ish to the end of an adjective to make it sound like more or less like a bit hippie-ish. So
I didn't even realise.
Well, just using this fantastic vocabulary without even thinking about it, aren't you, Dan?
Yep, you are either born with it or not.
Exactly, and you were born with it. So what else did you think anyway? Clash of cultures?
It was hot.
You can use more than one word answers, Dan, when you just say
I'm doing it.
cheap.
Yeah, it was the food was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was great. I really liked it. The beach was a little bit too busy for me, though. I'm English. I don't like to have sand kicked in my face when I'm lying down on the beach.
So only English people don't like that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the Italians in Palermo didn't seem to mind it. They didn't seem to mind kicking sand in my face, but I don't know. It was very, very crammed, and I was very, very pale.
Yeah, very crammed, which means very packed, like crowded. A lot of people crammed. And pale is just white, which is exactly what Dan is.
Yeah, I burn.
Okay, so let's talk about the good points and bad points. What are the good points and what are the bad points?
The good points are that it is cheap to eat and drink out there, and the food is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
The seafood especially. The bad point was it's just too hot for me. It's too hot.
It's too hot for you.
Yeah.
And that's the bad point. What other things did you notice about the city? Like maybe the rubbish. Did you notice the rubbish?
I didn't think it was that bad in comparison to other parts of Italy.
For example?
Milan.
You're saying Milan is a dirtier city than Palermo?
Well, it's just a bit... I don't know. Milan's a bit... Well, it's boring, isn't it? It's really boring, Milan.
What do you mean? Why is it boring?
It's just, I find it gloomy, depressing. It's like going to Birmingham or something. Somewhere you just don't want to go.
So again, gloomy, a good word there, which is depressing, which Dan actually said, but just to clarify.
Yeah.
So what other places in Italy do you prefer then?
Well, I love Rome.
Uh-huh.
I like San Remo. That's
Where is that?
up northwest.
So Dan actually has some Italian family. His surname is Gandolfi, so that's very Italian.
Correct. Yeah. And I like Piacenza. That's where my family are from. I quite like it there.
And how many times have you been there?
Oh, God knows how many times. Many.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that's there. How many times have you been there? Because the time was not specified, so we use present perfect again. Tell us something about present perfect again, Dan.
I've got absolutely no idea. Should I be listening to your...
You should be taking... These are grammar
Okay.
lessons. As I said, every day is a school day. Okay,
I haven't got a pen, so...
Okay, well, luckily we're recording, so you can listen back to it and take some notes.
And I certainly will do that.
Okay. So, where's the best place you've ever been, Dan? Not just Italy.
Well, Rome is my favourite place I've ever been.
In the whole world?
Yeah.
Is that because I was in Rome and you came to see me?
No. It was my favourite place because your trousers started falling down by your ankles crossing a junction. Do you remember that?
Unfortunately, is a true story. I was moving house and Dan was helping me, and I was carrying about 500 things, and in the middle of this, my trousers started to fall down to my ankles, the ankles being the bones of your feet, caviglia. And yeah, as I was crossing the street, which was incredibly embarrassing. So, Dan, before we go, we're going to do a conditional question, okay? And you have to answer this correctly using the conditional.
I don't know what a conditional is.
Sure. Well, just try to do your best, Dan. Do your best.
Okay.
That's all we ask.
That's all I can do. That's all
we ask. Okay, so if you were an animal, what animal would you be? So this is the second conditional. If you were, so the past, an animal, what would you be?
I would be, out of choice or just a reflection of my character?
You can answer in any way you want, Dan.
I don't like these questions because I can never think of an answer. I would be... What do you think I would be?
I think you would be... I'm trying to think of a dishonest animal. Because
snake. Let's go with snake.
Absolutely perfect. You would be a snake. Absolutely perfect. Anyway,
how do you mean how am I dishonest?
Well, let's not get into that, Dan. But thank you very much for your time. And we hope to see you on this show again.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Goodbye.
Cheers.
So that was the first episode of Rock and Roll English there with my fantastic guest, Daniel Gandolfi. Hopefully I will be able to get more interesting people on the show in the future, but for now, Dan is okay. So let's just have a recap on some of the vocabulary that we used there. So remember, Dan said hippie-ish, so added the ish to the end of the adjective to say like more or less. So another example would be, for example, that jacket is bluish. So it's not like 100% blue, but it's quite blue, bluish. He also said crammed about the beach in Palermo because there were too many people. So crammed. Often you say the buses are crammed. And another word he used there was gloomy, to say, like he used it to describe Milan, which is a very common thing, it seems, to describe Milan as a depressing city. So gloomy. Although I personally don't think that's true. Anyway, thanks for listening and see you again soon.